right, folks, welcome again to another edition of Tech Tuesdays. Joining us today is Jay Hill from the ILM product management team, ILM standing for Information Lifecycle Management. We also have with us today Pratik Parekh from our cloud product management team. And Pratik is responsible for really onboarding a lot of Informatica's on-premise assets into the cloud. And Jay has a wonderful demo for you today going over how you can use data masking procedures in your Salesforce sandboxes or your Oracle databases. So the agenda is, first we're going to just briefly go over what information lifecycle management is and where the concept of test data management specifically falls under. Then we're going to go into some of the challenges that people face in large-scale integration projects when creating test data sets. Then we're going to jump quickly into the demo, and Jay's going to go over some of the data masking rules for Salesforce and then how to create data masking rules for Oracle databases. And then we're going to go into a summary of what we learned for today's session. We're going to have a Q&A, and then we're going to talk a little bit about next week's Tech Tuesday session. So let's look at the entire scope of information lifecycle management. So just like any software development lifecycle, you first develop your integrations, you test them, stage them, push them into production. When they're no longer needed, you archive them, and the cycle starts all over again. Within that entire scope of ILM, what we're going to focus upon is the testing phase. And this is a very, very important phase in the entire process, because if things go wrong here, then your production instances can have a lot of errors which can slow down integration processes with all your other applications. So let's talk a little bit about Salesforce data sets. So let's say you have a Salesforce production instance and you have a variety of different Salesforce sandbox instances. If you want to test out your data before pushing it into production, there's really two approaches you can take. You can either use a developer or configuration-only sandbox, or you can use full sandbox copies of Salesforce. Whatever approach you take right now, it adds a lot of time, it adds a lot of cost, and there's a lot of risk, especially with the security of data that you encounter. So the solution is to really create a subset of your production data, but make sure that you're able to mask all the data. So in this way, first of all, you address the cost factor. You're not taking a full sandbox copy, you're just taking a subset of the data. And secondly, if there's any sensitive data in there from your production instance that you're using for test purposes, you're able to apply masking rules in order to preserve the security and confidentiality of that data. And in fact, Jay Hill has been in this space for a good many years, and so I'm just going to bring him online to ask him some of his insights into what he's seen with regards to masking sensitive data. Jay, so really what I want to ask you is, what have you seen with our customers with regards to the kinds of data that's confidential that they would have to mask?
Sure. It's excuse me. The main category is really around PII, or personally identifiable information, or confidential information. So if we're talking about Salesforce, then it's really the contact information, such as phone numbers, address information, first names, last names. It's all of the information that each of us, when we participate, in cloud applications or SaaS applications, and we share our personal information that we're concerned about. And it's also, so it's the customer's concern that a lot of time too in different industries that there are regulations that require organizations to ensure that they do protect that sensitive information, that they're not allowed to let it escape the organization, that they have to put in at least reasonable controls in order to protect that information. So especially in the sandbox environments, which we're talking about here now too, that's where the the developers, testers, trainers are, maybe some outsourced folks, some offshore people, employees that typically maybe ought not have access to that sensitive information. So all of that personally identifiable information, or maybe even related to credit cards, like the PCI DSS regulation, to make sure that one complies with that as well. So a lot of concern around protecting all of that sensitive information from leaving the organization.
Excellent. Thanks, Jay. And so with that, if you look at essentially some of the data masking rules that are applied, that's where I'm going to now bring in Jay Hill to actually go over some of these data masking rules so he can show you how you can mask sensitive data within Salesforce sandboxes as well as Oracle databases.
Right, so let's set the stage here where I'm now a developer. I'm in my sandbox for Salesforce.com. I want to perhaps maybe extend the contacts object, maybe add an additional field, maybe run some extractions out of Salesforce into a data warehouse, or perhaps test a new feed. But I don't have any data for contacts and even for the related cases. And this is the area I want to focus on, for me as the developer. So I have some choices here. I could go ahead and enter in some contact information in cases. I might have some idea of the validity of the data and some to make it nice and rich. But as the application extends, with multiple objects in different areas, it would likely be difficult for me to add a lot of business value by just manually entering in the data, and it would take me quite a bit of time to do that. So I've got some options. I could then utilize the full sandbox copy, but as Ashvin was mentioning earlier too, one, it's kind of expensive. You get one of those as far as the standard subscription with Salesforce, and it can get refreshed once every 30 days or so. So I'd rather use my sandbox environment, whether it's configuration only or a developer copy. But either way, I don't have any data in here. But I do know on the production instance, so we'll take a look at that real quick. So on the production side of things, there are good contact information in here. So let's drill into one of the contacts, like John Bond. And I can see in here, like we mentioned, lots of personally identifiable information, or PII. The phone number, a mobile phone, fax, email address. Lots of information that truly, as a developer, maybe I'm an outsourced person or contractor, I really shouldn't have access to that information. But also, as far as looking at the related cases, that a big power of Salesforce is that you can see that there are related objects. These could either be master detail or reference objects. In this case, for the these are related objects. The cases are objects in and of their own right. They're related to one another. So if I drill into one of these cases, I can see there's also some additional information, and maybe even sensitive information around the engineering requirements number. So I perhaps want to mask that as well. All right, so I know that now in production there's good data, but I don't want to necessarily share it exactly as is, but I also want to make sure that I bring over related objects. So with that, let's take a look at Informatica Cloud. And as we were mentioning, there's a new application that's in here, ones you may be familiar with, with data synchronization, or maybe data replication, and a new data masking application. So if you see in here, I already have two different tasks that are set up. Let's go and complete this first scenario with the Salesforce example. So just like any of the other tasks that you would set up for some of the other applications, it's a nice step-by-step process. A little chevron type diagram on the top there. I can either click on the different steps that way or utilize the next button to walk me through. So I give this task a name, quick description, and then from here on the source side, I'll pick from one of the existing sources. For the current release, We are offering both Salesforce and an Oracle relationship or a standard relational database, which could be on-premise or hosted. And in subsequent releases, we'll be extending this and starting out with additional SaaS applications like NetSuite and others. So I picked my Salesforce production. That's my source. I'm going to go ahead and pick multiple objects, and I already have this built out here just to save some time. But I want to bring over cases and the related contacts. If I did want to add some additional objects, I'd select on the object I want. Maybe I want to add accounts, etc., and keep building this out and out and out as much as I want. But for the demo purposes, let's keep it nice and simple. I'm just going to bring over cases and contacts. And I'll go to the next. And have some options here. Again, if you did create a full sandbox copy, you now have exposed sensitive data in your non-production Salesforce instance. So what you could do is say, same as source. So if you did that, then what that would mean is that you'll actually do masking in place, is what we call it. So you could do that, say masking in place. But in this case, I'm trying to ensure that I move data from source to target and mask it in root. So I'm going to pick that Salesforce Sandbox as my target. Okay, so from here, let's move on next to the data subsetting. And why we call this subsetting, it's a little bit different than just pure filtering, and you'll see this a little bit better when we do the the Oracle example. But what we're doing is bringing it over a subset or a complete hierarchy of all of the data that you've selected. So if you did specify filter criteria on a sub-object or great sub-object, we'll traverse up the chain and back down to ensure we bring over all of the related rows of those objects so you have a nice fully intact subset of data. So in this case, I'm going to keep it kind of simple. We're going to filter on the contact for last name, and the bond was the last name that we were just taking a look at, so we'll just use that guy. And simply move on to the next for masking, and this will be the final step. You can look at all of the objects here, or just look at object by object, which is maybe a little bit easier, so that matches directly with the screen. So I could see there's certain areas that I can't mask, let's say like the account ID. That's the actual identifier in the Salesforce database. I can't mask that one, but there are lots of sensitive data on that contact object. So I see there's the assistant phone number. We have a lot of out-of-the-box masking rules, which Ashwin mentioned earlier. So on these, I'll just pick the rule that applies to the particular column. So the phone number for birth date, so date columns, I have some options. I can nullify the date or use a random date. So random I've already got configured. And for some of the rules on the right-hand side here, you got a nice little configure option, which gives you some options that you can put in place. So in this case, for the random dates, I'm going to make it a range between here. And actually, I'm also going to blur the date, maybe make people a little bit 2 years older or 10 years younger, and then go ahead and save this. So one by one, I just kind of go down to the different sensitive data. Maybe I'll point out one more here with email. We have two different options for email. You can either do a standard one or advanced. For advanced, what it is that you'll pick the first name column. So in this case, I know contacts object does have a first name. I'll say I'll take the first character of the first name, put in a delimiter of a period, and then put the last name and maybe just the last 10 characters followed by info.com. If I did just pick the standard email one, all that would do is generate random characters at randomcharacters.com. And that would be the case if you want to make sure you don't mistakenly send out emails out of your system. So again, I just now go one by one, find some other sensitive data, put in the appropriate masking rules. All of these masking rules are the initial set of the rules that we've created. We'll be adding additional rules over time, and then in the subsequent releases allow customers to create their own rules. Okay, so that is pretty much it with the setup. And from here, it's identical to any of the other Informatica Cloud applications where I pick the agent to run this on. So I do the save and run. Say OK. We'll let this go. So I'm anticipating this to move over 3 rows, which is the contact and the related to cases. And there we go. So it did move over the 3. So let's double check now on my target environment, which was the sandbox salesforce.com. So for contacts, wonderful. I did move over 1 contact, and it's definitely not John Bond any longer. That's the 1 contact. And the phone numbers, which were 312 area codes, have also changed across the board. Phone number, mobile, and fax. Email is also different. So wonderful. I now have all of the sensitive data has been obfuscated and masked in the non-production sandbox copy. And in addition, we re-related, or what we do as far as what we call relationship reconciliation, is that I brought over 2 cases which were associated to that contact, and I did not have to put in a reference ID a column onto the different objects. This was automatically taken care of under the covers for me, but I can do both types of objects in the same data movement. So in here I also have the two cases, and I did actually also mask the engineer requirements number. All right, so just a quick recap then. So what we did was to be able to move a fully consistent subset of data from the production Salesforce over to the target sandbox environment. We masked sensitive data en route before it lands on the target, and in addition, we brought over the related cases in what we call the relationship reconciliation without requiring you to create any reference ID columns or anything on the different objects. That's all done under the covers for you. All right. So with that one, Ashwin, how are we doing on time? Are we good for the Oracle demonstration, or we need?
Yeah, we do have about 10 minutes left, so definitely we do have time for the Oracle component as well.
Okay, very good. All right, so let me close that one out there. Okay, so we'll switch ads now. So this is a on-premise database. This is what we call, it's just for demo purposes, but it represents an airline loyalty program. Let's say like a United Mileage Plus program, where this database has customers, and again, lots of sensitive data in here. Last name, first name, credit cards, what looks like a social security number, date of birth, passport, maybe more information than is typically available, but for demo purposes, we want to make this nice and obvious. There's lots of sensitive data. For address information, again, some sensitive information around the phone number, maybe the address itself. Related to the customers also then have their airline tickets, which you'll then see maybe a denormalized database here and some redundancy where we have the credit card and social security number also put in here. And then the tickets, maybe there's some attachments along with the ticket. So some information here as far as the path of where these attachments are stored. Okay, so again, playing the role as a developer, there's another schema, which is this target database, which is exact replication of the other one. And I'm going to need, as the developer, maybe I'm going to add some new columns or write some reports or extractions, but I don't have any data. So again, same problem that we did for the cloud use case with Salesforce.com, but now for the on-premise use case, exact same thing. I have a nice schema that's built up here, but I don't have any data in it. Wonderful. That's a nice problem to have, because Informatica Cloud with the data masking application can solve that problem as well. So I also have, again, a task that's already pre-created here, just for the sake of time, that we go through the same process here, where I go through next. In this case, instead of picking my Salesforce production, I'll pick my Oracle local, and this happens to be, it's on a VM image on my laptop that I'm pointing to, which I was just showing you. Again, I can pick multiple or single. As for the different objects, you add them just like you do for the Salesforce side of things, and then you can also create relationships. So in this case, I've created a relationship between the ticket and the ticket attachment table via the ticket number. So that's the join on those two. In addition, the ticket is related to the customer table on the customer ID. And the address table is related to customer via also the customer ID. So all this is a nice little subset hierarchy of the the application. And what I want to be able to do is bring over data in a consistent fashion so that the application that sits on top of that database will be functionally intact, as well as the database itself. So what my intent here is to bring over for the developer or tester a couple of customers, and then the related tickets and all of the attachments, and then the customer's address as well. As you see, I built this out with the ticket is actually really the driving object. I'll move on to the target now. I'll also pick the target in this case, the Oracle target for the current release, and even really to satisfy the standard use cases that you go from like to like. So it's Salesforce to Salesforce or Oracle to Oracle. And that'll likely be, for, at least in the next few releases or so, because that's the standard use case we're trying to solve here. This is not data replication or data synchronization. This is purely to move data to a non-production environment to support the standard software development lifecycle. And I'll go ahead and insert. I could do upserts or updates. I know there's no data in there, and I'm going to truncate the tables just in case. All right, so now, which wasn't the case for Salesforce, a couple of other options open up. I could do process only the first 20 rows or so, or only maybe a first percentage. But I'll do the process all the rows, and in this case, I'm going to select a filter criteria on customer with the last name Tally. I could get nice and advanced if I want to, put in some and conditions and things in here. At least for now, I'll just leave it simple with just the last name Tally. And same sort of deal as we saw with the Salesforce, is that I can pick either all objects or go one by one. So in the ticket, I'm going to mask the credit card and the social security number. On the customer table, credit card, date of birth, email, first name, social security number, last name, phone number. So again, lots of sensitive data, and all I do is pick the rule that I want, and off you go. With that, I'll use the exact same agent that I've used before, and I will just save and run this. So this is a little bit more intricate example where it's not just 3 rows or 3 objects. I'm going to bring over, 6 different tables or 5 different tables and values in each. So it's 26 rows. We'll do a quick look at my target database and see what happened there. So customers, wonderful. I've got one customer, which does match. Let's just double check. On the source side of things, there was one customer. Oops, get the filter going. There we go. So there was Tally was the last name. So there was only one customer. Their silver membership, credit card number 5126-1149. I brought over one person. So the credit card 5126. So we keep the issuer, but we did generate a bunch of other random numbers followed by the appropriate checksum for credit cards. So it's a valid-looking credit card. It's going to pass all application checks. But then we changed the last name, the first name, credit card, social security number, and any other sensitive data. But in addition to that, we brought over, the address information and masked any sensitive data as well as there, and brought over the related tickets. And this is just associated with customer number 597, which was, this one customer. Very good, 597. And the tickets, they also have some ticket attachments, so we brought those over also. All right, so just to recap on this scenario, it is it's an on-premise Oracle database that, again, as a developer, tester, trainer, I need sensitive data. I need a subset of data in order for me to be able to run some new extracts, to test some new functionality. So as I move that subset of data over, I need to make sure it's functionally intact, as well as any sensitive data that it is obfuscated or masked before it lands on my target environment. And I utilized the same tool, Informatica Cloud, with the data masking application to move that I used for Salesforce. I could also use for Oracle. And that was that.
Great demo, Jay. If you could just hand me the ball, make me presenter, just to have a summary of what we learned, as well as how you can get successful with data masking. Make sure that when you are selecting the kind of objects you want from your production instance, that you select all of the objects, including the parent-child objects, as well as all the related objects that you want to mask the data for. Because let's say you forget one or more of the related objects, and you test it out in your sandbox, but in a production, you actually have the full data set, and you haven't tested out those different permutations and combinations, you might run into some bugs. Also, make sure that whatever data attribute you are masking for, that you identify the appropriate masking rule. And also make sure that you have a separate Informatica Cloud account that maps to your Salesforce sandbox account. This ensures you have even more security in your integration processes. So with that, we're going to move into the Q&A session. And the first question here is probably for Jay. This question is about the CreateBy and the CreatedDate. So the question is whether you can move that information into production, or rather, can you move that information from production into sandbox?
Great. Yeah, good question. Yeah, if I kind of went over that kind of quickly on the Salesforce side of things. I mean, there are certain internal fields. The obvious ones are like the ID fields, account ID, customer ID, contact ID, and all of those, Salesforce itself takes care of the creation of those, and those are what's used to link objects together. So for those specifically, we don't allow you to put masking rules on. In addition, there's other internal calculated fields like the CreateBy and CreatedDate that actually represents who ran the actual task flow or task, or who actually manually entered those data into Salesforce. So certain kind of protected fields like the IDs or calculated fields, we don't allow you to make a mistake and don't allow those actually to put masking rules on them.
Great. The next question is around whether you can use this data masking application with the data synchronization service within Informatica Cloud.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I mean, you have lots of options. Using the different Informatica Cloud services, you could either use data synchronization plus the data masking, and that's completely fine. So you synchronize data, let's say maybe from on-premise Oracle database, put that into Salesforce. In this case, Salesforce Sandbox for testing. Once that data is there, before you turn it over to your developers, then run the in-place masking against that Salesforce Sandbox. So, or the other way around. If you're maybe trying to extract out of Salesforce to put on-premise into a data warehouse for some analytics, before you actually go into production, you want to test that. So extract on-premise, put it in the Oracle database, then utilize the data masking task against it. So either way, but yes, definitely supported as far as utilizing multiple applications together.
Excellent. There's a bit of a roadmap question here, so it's probably a question for Prateek. And the question is, do we support NetSuite right now?
Yeah, so NetSuite is in the plans. We'll have that in our probably in the next release, sometime first quarter of next year. That's our current plan. Along with it, we plan to support many more SaaS applications and also on-premise databases. Jay, you want to add anything to it?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Pratik. Yeah. So with the data masking task or application, rather, it's built on the Informatica cloud platform and infrastructure and all that. There are essentially for the data masking service, we need to certify the different sources and targets that are already in place for Informatica Cloud. So there might be just a little bit of lag for the data masking application, where the platform will go first, then we'll go ahead and certify the different connectivity. But we'll make sure that as the releases come out, which are really pretty quick, as you know, for Informatica Cloud, pretty much every quarter, that we'd certify additional connectivity and make sure there's a nice full breadth of connections.
Excellent. Thank you both for that. Since we are about 5 minutes over time, I'm just going to take 2 more questions. One of them is around the masking rule. So this is probably a question for Jay. The question is whether you can create your own masking rule.
Yeah, good question. Right. Yeah, so the thing is, you saw, when I was doing the demo there, that there was a slew of out-of-the-box masking rules. That was our first pass at what we deemed as far as the major personally identifiable information and masking rules you had associated with it. We're trying to keep the user flow as simple as possible, where you just kind of point and click and pick and choose and off you go. So initial release, we did not allow users to create their own rules, but in subsequent releases, whether it's the next or the one right after that, we'll be able to allow users to either create their own rules within PowerCenter as a maplet and bring that in as what's called a plugin with the Informatica Cloud infrastructure, or also to be able to create more complex rules using an expression editor directly within Informatica Cloud. Again, the lucky thing for us is that those technologies and features already exist for other Informatica Cloud services. It's now just integrating those into the data masking service.
Excellent. And the final question for the day before we just go into our next Tech Tuesdays session will be, the question is around whether you can move Salesforce data to a database using data masking.
Okay, yeah, good question. So that scenario, that is where you'd want to use the 2 different types of Informatica Cloud services. One, likely then data synchronization, where you move, let's say, Salesforce to Onpremise and then use data masking after the fact. Because right now, again, the supported use case is primarily around moving production data and a subset of it to a non-production environment where the source and target, if they're not identical, they ought to be very close to identical, where there's not any missing columns and whatnot. So for Salesforce, it makes a lot of sense where you request then a developer or configuration-only sandbox copy, where then the metadata is identical to the production, and then you move a subset of the data utilizing the data masking application.
Excellent. Thanks, Jay and Pratik, for the Q&A session. So let's just quickly go over some of the next steps. So for those of you that want some more details on data masking and you want to read up on it, there's a certain community link on the Informatica community site. It's within our August 2013 user guide. So if you go on to Chapter 11 of that August 2013 user guide, you can read all the capabilities of our data masking service. And if you'd like to try out data masking, please go to informaticacloud.com/products/cloud-test-data-management/data masking. You want to try out that service. And for those of you that were with us a couple of weeks ago, we had a session on templates, whereby we had a customer use case of building a Zora to Great Plains template. And we also showed you how to use our master repository to import some ready-made templates. Next week, on October the 1st, our session is actually going to focus on building your own template from scratch. So how do you use the template designer in order to build a complete template from scratch and then import that in Informatica Cloud? And we will be having Naresh Govindaraj from our product management team, as well as Amal Dongre from engineering team on that session. So thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session of Tech Tuesdays. See you again next Tuesday at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you. Bye-bye.